University.
Thank you, Mark. Right, so am I going to mess with you, Brian, if I walk around out here like this? Okay. I can't sit still. So my name is George Kantor. I'm a systems scientist at the Robotics Institute at Carnegie Mellon University. And unlike most of you, I don't know very much about growing plants. But I'm here because I find this all very exciting. So when you think about the vertical farm, okay, and this is a Google search yielded this nice rendering right away, and you look at that thing, I think all of us are here because we see something cool in that. But if you go beyond the first reaction, which is, wow, that's kind of cool, I think the second reaction says a lot about you and your background and your interests. And my second reaction is, wow, that's a fantastic habitat for robots to live in. Okay? So, I mean, look at that. It's, and you think about the needs of this particular application as I understand them. Density drives this, so you need to have the plantings very dense. When you talk about orienting things vertically, you have these structures that aren't going to be that friendly for humans to get around in. The environment's controlled. Precision is important. So it seems like there's a lot of opportunities here to adopt some of the technologies that I've developed with a whole community of other people over the past 20 or so years, and look for new places to use them. So I'm here to talk today about two general technologies. The first one is sensor networks, and the second one is robotics. And these two technologies give us four, I'll call them fundamental capabilities. Okay, so the first one is, all right, if I learn how to work this, the first one is monitoring. So monitoring just means look at what's going on, measure what's happening in the world. Mobility is the ability to get around in your environment. Perception is kind of like monitoring, right? It's the ability to look at the environment and understand what you're seeing. And then the last task is manipulation, be able to actually do things, right? You need all these things together if you're going to have automation of any kind. So my goal today is to come to you and just talk to you about some of these tools we have in this toolbox of these technologies, and start the conversation with you to look for ways to use these tools in automating this kind of vertical farming or controlled environment agriculture. So the first thing is monitoring, and I'll put and control in parentheses there because control is sort of the flip side of monitoring. You can't control something until you monitor it. And I've been working on a project funded by the USDA Specialty Crops Research Initiative. The PI is John Lee Cox here at Maryland, and there are a bunch of great people on this team, including Mark Van Eersel. And we've been putting together a sensor network to do irrigation control in ornamental crops. So nurseries, container nurseries, greenhouses, field nurseries. And the basic idea of a sensor network is you have these little boxes, they're battery powered, they're about yay big. You can connect sensors to them. Our little boxes are kind of special in that you can also connect relays to them and turn things on and off. You set them up out in your production environment, be it a field or a greenhouse, whatever. They find each other, they form a network, they relay all the data back to a data station. And of course, once you get to some local data station, you can look at it on your computer, you can get it out on the internet, and you can look at it from anywhere you want. With the control capability, we can look at the data as they come in and make decisions about how to irrigate, in particular, in this particular case, and feed out commands back out to the network that allow it to do things like that. So this is just sort of a quick look at some of the things that happen. With our particular system, you get a web-based interface. So here's a greenhouse that's instrumented with a bunch of these nodes. You get sort of a quick overview of what the status is. You can set parameters to make it green is good, red is bad, yellow is maybe you should look at this. You can get a human user can get a quick overview of this. And there are things you can do that there's no rocket science here. You'd expect to be able to do all this stuff. You can plot time series of the data that you're collecting. We have an interface for the controller. I won't try to parse through what's going on here, but you can set points to do automated irrigation control. You can do scheduling, so you can say, come on at this time, go off at this time. you can make things exclusive and things like that. So what we have here is really just an infrastructure. It's just a tool. There's no magic here. This is just a nice, flexible infrastructure that allows you to gather data, bring it all into a central location, look at it, make some decisions about how to make some controls, and propagate those all back out. We've set this up in 10 or so test sites up and down the East Coast, and this particular project is, again, looking at irrigation control, saving water, and the results have been pretty good. I'm not going to go too far into what's going on, except to say that there's huge benefits. If you irrigate and pay attention to how much water you're using, you can cut the amount of water you're using in half doing some pretty simple things. So if you think about this sensor network kind of system, it's got some limitations associated with it. And the big limitation is the kind of sensors that we can use. So the sensors, I mean, the whole philosophy of the sensor network is that you set the things up and then you walk away and let them take care of themselves. So that takes a special kind of sensor. It has to be a mature sensor. It has to be rugged and be able to live in the field. It can't be the kind of sensor that needs to be calibrated every week. You want to have lots of them so you get sort of a dense sensing in the environment, which means usually, most of us aren't made of gold, so usually that means the sensors have to be reasonably priced. They have to generate small amounts of data just because of the way the network is set up, and they have to be low power. So there are a good number of things we can do today, sensors that you can just go buy off the shelf and plug into a sensor node, and they're the things you would expect to measure. So we can measure things like temperature and relative humidity and light, and soil moisture and leaf wetness and wind speed and these kind of standard environmental parameters. There are a bunch of things that would be really nice to measure that we can't currently measure. And we can't currently measure them for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's because no sensor has been invented yet to measure that things. Other times it's because the sensor is there, it just hasn't been integrated with the system yet. Okay. So when I think about the challenges associated with monitoring and control with sensor network, as I mentioned, a big one is just limited sensing. Okay? If I wanted to do something like monitor the chemistry in one of these aquaponics systems, I'm not sure I have a sensor I know that I don't have a sensor off the shelf that I can plug right into my sensor network today. It may be relatively straightforward to develop that capability with some integration, but it's not there right now. So there's some integration challenges there, and then there's also a need to invent new types of sensing. A big problem and a general problem is this idea of converting data to knowledge. So very quickly, you put 10 sensor nodes out in the field, you connect a few sensors to each node. Pretty soon you got more data than you can possibly stand to look at. And so you got to figure out what to do with that. And this idea of taking that data and automatically turning it into something that's useful, some bit that you can make a decision off of, is a pretty key idea. In our sensor network project, some of my collaborators are doing some really interesting things using plant physiological models. So you measure the environmental parameters, you use those as inputs into a plant model, and you guess what the plant is doing, how much water it wants at any particular time in the instance of irrigation control. Alternatively, we put these things in the hands of people who just do sort of data-driven trial and error. I have this notion that set point control is going to work. I'm just going to play with a few set points to get the result I want. But there's, generally this, how do you take that data and make it into something useful is a big challenge. And then the biggest challenge, and this is going to be a theme that repeats going forward, is to find compelling applications. Okay, this is a tool. I am not a plant guy. I am a technology guy. And this is a tool, and there's a lot of things we can go with it. There's a lot of different directions we can take it in. Some are easy, some are hard. And what we need to do is talk to each other and find the places where it makes sense to push this technology forward to address the needs that you have here. Okay, mobility. And this one will be pretty short. I just wanted to point out, this is with another specialty crops research initiative project that Sanjeev's actually the PI of. This is a Toro eWorkman vehicle that's been modified to be a robot. And it drives around autonomously in apple orchards. Okay? And I'm showing you this because we can do this, right? We can solve the mobility problem. The reason it's solvable in this particular case is because there's a lot of structure in this environment, and we can take advantage of that. So the general mobility problem, getting around, is that it's a solvable problem, right? I probably, if you have a specific environment and you have a specific kind of vehicle that hasn't been automated before, there's going to be some work in making that vehicle get around by itself. But it can be done, right? We've been through several iterations of this, and we know how to do it. All right. So when I think about mobility and the kinds of systems that we're talking about, this controlled environment agriculture, well, it's not that big of a challenge, really, because in the controlled environment agriculture, we can put even more structure into it. And because we're starting with a clean slate of paper, so to speak, we can design the environment to make it amenable to mobility. And that's really a key thing to do. So we can engineer the problem to make it easier for robots to get around. We can have rails, we can have gantries, we can have things hanging from the ceiling. So I don't really see the need to have like humanoid-looking robots walking around being intelligent in a vertical farm, because it makes a lot more sense to just put a rail in and have them drive up and down that way. Another challenge, this is going to echo over and over again, is all right, we've got this technology, I've got this ability, I can take a vehicle and I can make it drive around by itself. Okay, what do we do with that? What does it make sense to do with that technology in controlled environment agriculture? Okay, perception is just a fancy version of monitoring. All I mean is that we're using a little bit better sensors and we're trying to extract more information out of them. So two technologies we look a lot at are laser scanners. So you take a laser scanner shoots a beam out, tells you where the closest object is along the line of that beam, and it scans the beam back and forth. You put that beam scanning back and forth on a robot that's driving down a row, and it goes like this, and it builds up this nice 3D picture of the row you just drove by. You can then use that to estimate the volume. This is in a vineyard, for example, here. You can estimate the volume of that canopy, and you can do things like put it into a map, put it into a GIS system, and you can look at which parts of the vineyard are thriving and which parts are not thriving. You can do things with cameras. Cameras are a nice sensor for perception. This is Nicholas Correll is setting up a lab at University of Colorado, where he's got this sort of vertically oriented hydroponic system, and he's automating it. And so as a first step, here's a camera panning across. And you can see, even without doing any processing, this might be a useful thing. For a human looking remotely at this, you get a lot of information here. Okay. But of course, it gets really interesting when you go beyond that and you start to automatically parse the images that you look at. So we've done some work again. This is with the same project that I showed you the driving vehicle for. You stick a camera on there, and you can drive around and you can find apples and things like that. Right? You can even find green apples, which is pretty cool. And you can do similar things with grapes, right? So you can take these very complicated data products that humans, we just eat and we get knowledge out of those right away, but a computer can't get that knowledge out. You've got to be able to do some processing to take this image and do something like count grapes, right? And once you do that processing, then you can actually surpass the human, right? You give an image to this, you give this image to a human and ask him to count how many grapes are there. He might do it once. The second time, that's just not that much fun of a task. Okay, here's more grape detection stuff. So, so perception is difficult in unstructured environments. It's very challenging. But again, we have this beautiful advantage here that we can structure the environment, right? We can make the kinds of tomatoes where the tomatoes are exposed and you can see them and they're not hidden behind leaves. My recurring theme, we need to find compelling problems to go after. What is it? There's lots of things we can do with this. What is it we actually do? Okay. And then the last one on the list is manipulation, the ability to go in and do stuff, right? And this is kind of the big payoff. All this stuff about gathering information and looking at stuff, that's all kind of fun. But when you can actually get in and do something like harvest, like spray, then really interesting things happen. Unfortunately, this is very hard. This is a baby step to show something that's extremely interesting. Extremely easy to do. I had a student come into our lab and spend 6 months there, and we set up this gantry crane with a gripper. Movie's not playing. It's not all that exciting of a movie, but let's see if we can make it play. So this is just a baby step toward doing some manipulation that might be useful to this kind of controlled environment agriculture. I don't know. This is obviously a simple problem, but we can go around. We have a Kinect camera that looks down and identifies the holes in the NFT system. There's a simple gripper that can pick up pots and move it around. This is obviously going to get to be a much more harder problem when you have plants in those pots. But like I said, this is a baby step. Here's something that has nothing to do with agriculture, but this gives you an idea of kind of what the state of the art in manipulation looks like. This is Sid Srinivasa, who's a professor at Carnegie Mellon, and he does a lot of work in robots to assist humans getting around their houses and just doing daily household tasks. So here he is. He's got his robot. It's a very fancy robot, very expensive robot, and it's doing manipulation tasks such as picking up these objects and moving them around, putting them in different places. Okay? And you see this theme that you saw in Professor Kondo's talk where, you know, okay, this is cool. Yeah, you're moving the stuff around, but it's kind of slow. It's kind of clunky. You know, if these objects in particular are sort of well-known, they're all the same size and shape. They're not like plants. You don't have to move things. They're not soft and fragile. So there's a lot of really big challenges in manipulation. Okay? But fortunately, we don't have to completely automate everything, right? There is an interesting challenge going forward is figuring out where the people can help, where it makes the most sense to use people. People are really good at some things. They're not so good at other things. Here's an example with the APM robot where we've put a platform on the back of it, and now this guy who's tying up the tops of his peach trees doesn't need to carry a ladder and climb up and down the ladder. And the robot just takes him right down the row. Okay. So it doesn't have to be, you know, robots don't have to be all by themselves in their own little world. They can be tools that a human uses, and you exploit the parts that a human's good at, and you use the robot for the parts that the human doesn't want to do or that the human's not very good at. Okay. And another idea, same line of thought, use a machine to help humans. You know, this idea of grabbing an apple. Okay, there are varieties of apples. When you grab them, an untrained human will bruise them just by grabbing them. So this is a really difficult manipulation task. So let's not even try to have a robot do that. Let's have the human just pick the apple and then put it somewhere here and have a machine take it somewhere else. So this is a machine that was developed also as part of our apple orchard project. See if you can see what's going on here. These guys are picking apples, and he's putting them into a little tube there. And there's this nice vacuum system that just pulls the apple down, gently deposits it into a bin with all the other apples in a way that doesn't hurt them and doesn't bruise them, right? So we've taken advantage in this particular case of what a human's good at and mechanized the things that are easy to mechanize, and you have this nice relationship between the two. Okay, so manipulation challenges. Generally, manipulation is just really, really hard. And, you know, plants are delicate, especially when you think about plants. It's a hard task. But I think that there are solvable problems. And I'll get back to my echoing point here. This is why I'm here, because I want to talk about what kinds of problems we can solve. There are certainly some things we can automate. There are some things that are feasible to automate. Whether or not they make economic sense to automate, or whether or not they make sense from a process point of view to automate, I need your help in figuring out. But there are things we can definitely do. So the take-home message for all this is that, yeah, we have these technologies. They're like tools in the toolbox. They're not silver bullets. None of these things are yet general purpose things that you just get off the shelf and they do what you want it to. Every single technology that I've shown you here, and this is just the tip of a very large iceberg, has been developed for a specific purpose, to solve a specific problem, right? So they're not tools that we can just take and apply. They're tools that take work to apply. So we've got all these tools out there. They hold a lot of potential for this world, I think. But, and this is a big but, they've all been developed for specific problems. So the way we move this forward is we find specific problems. We find our own specific problems, and we move the technologies forward into those specific problems. That's all I had to say.
Thank you, George. We have a few minutes for questions as the next speaker gets ready for his presentation.
Have you done any work with machine learning? Like an expert tomato picker who's been doing it for 30 years uses a ganglion response, maybe tactically, because he sort of glances and thinks there's a tomato back there, but he uses tactile systems. And then my second question was, with that is, have you been working with some tactile sensors for like harvesting and those sort of things?
So there are some techniques that people call machine learning that go into the work that you've seen here just in the classification of the images. But we have not done anything, I haven't, and I don't know of any, I haven't worked with anyone who's done anything directly with tactile sensing. It's a very interesting area. I mean, it's an important part of the puzzle, definitely.
Do we have another question?